Internet is Oxygen was created by an EYEJ Youth Council member to reflect the necessity of high-speed internet access for all in this country. It impacts our ability to do schoolwork and limits our ability to look for jobs or access telehealth. Why have digital inequities occurred for so long? And now that we know to what extent, now what? Where do we go from here, and who needs to be at the table to advance this work?
Benefit in the partnership between private and public, right? When we start talking about major corporations and the corporate social responsibility to support our kids and support our schools to be successful, and that's really major. Another thing that's critical is that we really embrace the efficiencies that came out of the pandemic. Right now, there are so many things you can do virtually that before we had limitations around. And so this is a really great opportunity to say, leveraging those efficiencies, how can we align funding and strategic plans to prioritize student connectivity in a way that can make sure that our babies are successful?
And just building on what Dr. Taylor just mentioned, for starters, I want to bring both a global perspective as well as the essence of the digital divide, because I think it does apply not just to the students and the people in Cleveland and the rest of the US, but also more looking at a global perspective. Those are similar challenges that we're currently facing. And when you think about what the last 18 months or so have brought to the world in terms of the pandemic, you've seen a massive recession that's hit globally, and even in the US. And unfortunately, the people who struggle the most are those who have the least. And what we've seen is that, especially with the pandemic, it's just highlighted the importance of the internet. And prior to this, and it's interesting to hear you talk about internet is oxygen, because a few years back, I saw a really great piece of content or phrase that stated that actually most people don't care about technology, they just want it to work. For them, it's like oxygen. And what's really interesting about this is that when you think about oxygen, right now we're all breathing, but we're not thinking about the oxygen that we're taking in. We'll only really care about it if we don't have it. And really, that's what the lack of connectivity actually brings as a big challenge to a lot of people. Especially with the pandemic, people were not able to go to school and could not be able to connect, to learn, to get their work done, etc. And even simple transactions such as purchases of essential goods and services. So it's really important and paramount that both public sector and private sector come together to be able to help solve for this. And at Google, there's a white paper that we released last year called Digital Sprinters that looks at a couple of simple framework, or puts it in a simple framework that looks at a couple of different pillars. And the first one is around physical capital. And I think that that is a really critical component. And one of the things that we advocate for is not just creation of physical infrastructure, but also the sharing of that physical infrastructure so that we can be able to lower the cost of access to the end consumer. And it's a really important thing because as many people, they do have connectivity passing by them. The biggest challenge is the affordability. So we need to really be able to think about that. And I'm shocked when I first read the 40% statistic, because it is very similar to the challenges that we're facing here in Africa. The second piece is once people have that connectivity, the ability for them to understand what their potential is around the internet. And that comes around human capital, which is the education component. Let's educate our youth to understand what's the opportunities that they can take, that they can be able to build on, etc. And then the last two is competition, which comes in around having the right policies in place. Government needs to be able to implement those tax rebates, etc., for companies such as T-Mobile that may be laying that infrastructure and that heavy capital expenditure. And then last but not least is technological adoption. So I'll pause there. Thank you.
The phrase